Okay, so in the second part of this tutorial, we're going to be going ahead and creating the actual plugin code. Now, although we're creating a jQuery plugin, which might seem relatively difficult to do, it's actually extremely easy. As long as you know some JavaScript and you're familiar with jQuery, it shouldn't be that difficult whatsoever. So what we're going to do is we're going to create the standard notation for creating a jQuery plugin. Then we're going to go ahead and fill in the gaps, allow the user to specify some options, and then we're actually going to make this thing work. So to create a plugin, we're going to start with two rounded brackets. This is how I always remember it. Inside, we're going to create a function, and inside the dollar, which is obviously what the notation that jQuery uses, and then we're going to create a opening curly bracket and then a closing curly bracket down here, and then in brackets outside of this we're just going to say jQuery and including a line terminator, a semicolon. Now inside we need to create the name of our plugin, so we're going to say $.fn, which means function, and then we're going to say back to top. I'm just going to call it back to top. Now this is going to be equal to function and then brackets and then an opening curly and a closing curly. So as long as you remember this notation, this is all you need to start to create a plugin, and this is all we need to do in terms of actually telling jQuery that this is a plugin when we initialize it on our index.html page. Okay, so inside of here, the only thing left to do now is supply options, because we're actually allowing the user to pass options through to our plugin. Now we'll go over to index.html and we'll actually try and initialize this plugin, and we'll actually pass, well, we won't pass anything through it just yet, but we'll say alert and then we'll say working. So as long as we initialize this plugin, we should have an alert saying working. So let's just go ahead and say hash back to top. Remember, we're applying the plugin to this element here, which is back to top. So dot back to top. Okay, and inside here we're going to specify our options a bit later. So let's just leave that blank for now. Okay, so let's go over to our browser and refresh, and you see that we get this alert saying working. So now that we know this is working, let's make sure that the user can pass through options to our plugin. So the options we want, as we've said before, are the position that the back to top appears at and the speed. Okay, so let's go ahead and sort of set this up inside of here. Now one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to restore this object inside of a variable, and the reason for this is I'm going to be creating some well, I'm going to be using code inside of functions inside of this plugin, and therefore I just want to sort of restore this. Usually you'd say this dot something, but I'm going to say var this underscore equals this, and then I can now use this variable here inside, say, a function like alert this, for example. Otherwise it would be extremely easy to do. I'm not sure if this is best practice, but this is how I always work in terms of plugins. It just means it keeps the code a lot shorter as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and alert out the settings that we pass through to make sure these are working. We're going to create a variable called settings, and this is going to be equal to an extension of our options. So I'm going to create some curly brackets here, and then I'm going to say options. So we're extending our options, and we're going to set some defaults here. So the first one we want is position, and this is going to be by default equal to 1000, comma, down a new line, and then we're going to have speed, and by default this is going to be equal to 500. So if under here we were going to say alert out settings, and this, by the way, is now an array, so settings position. When we go over to our browser and refresh, you see we get 1000 alerted out, and that would be the same for the speed as well. So we know that this is working, but we now want to sort of pass these through. So I'm just going to add a space and then settings speed, and let's go ahead and pass through some values of our own. So I'm going to say position 2000 and speed 100. So now we should have an alert saying 2000, a space, and then 100. So let's refresh, and that's worked. So now that we know that we can pass through settings into our page, our plugin, sorry, we can we can sort of use these essentially. Okay, so let's go ahead and pop these settings into variables. So I'll just pop a comment in here, settings, and I'll say var position equals settings position. Now this isn't entirely necessary, but it just means I can use a shorthand version of this instead of having to write this all the time, and it also puts them into a variable so they can be, say if you wanted to add 1,000 to that for any reason, etc, etc, then position would be dynamically updated. So it's just really the best practice to do this. So settings, speed. Okay, so now that we've got our two settings, we want to go ahead and align this this sort of widget in the middle of our page. Now to do this we need to work out the width of the document, and then we need to place it half of that length, and then we need to subtract the overall width of the element here divided by 2, so half of the overall element. So it might sound complicated, but if you're any good at maths, which I'm not, then it will be extremely easy to work out. So I'm going to say this.css, and inside here I'm going to say left, which means obviously we've fixed the position, so we can use left to offset from the left. So if we would say left 100, that would be 100 pixels from the left. You can see that that would just change now. So we can dynamically update this. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to use our selector and say document.width divided by 2. Now you'll see that that will place that in almost the center, but now again, like I said, we want to halve this, get half of this value, and then subtract that so we place it directly in the center. So we want to minus this width divided by 2. Okay, so relatively straightforward, and now we get that positioned. So I've done something wrong. Let's just double check. Oh yeah, sorry, this dot width. And let's refresh, and you can see that's in the center now, and it follows us down as before. Okay, so we want to hide this back to top element now. So let's just go ahead and quickly open up our CSS file, and we'll say back to top display none. Okay, so now when we refresh our page, that will be invisible. And now we can use jQuery to show this when we're a particular way down our page. So to do this, we use our document selector, and we say .scroll. So this is an event handler. So when the user scrolls down the document, is essentially, or up or down the document, is essentially what this means. Then we want to carry out everything within this function here. So we first of all want to determine the scroll position. So var scroll pos equals, and we want to say window using our window selector dot scroll top. So this will return a value of where we're at on our page. So there's not really any easy way of sort of displaying this to us, but we could sort of alert this value and try and quickly scroll down and have this alert out value. So when we scroll down, it says 20 and 0, 559, 0, blah blah blah. So it's gone a bit crazy, but yeah, let's just try and get rid of that. That's a bit annoying. Okay. Right, okay, so we've got rid of that, so that probably wasn't a good idea. However, we have determined the scroll position. Now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and check if it's greater than or equal to the position that the user supplied. So for example, if they supply position in here, if the position that we're currently scrolled down at is greater than or equal to, say, 1,000, then we want to show our back to the top link at the top. So we want an if-else statement. So if something, otherwise something else. So if scroll position is greater than or equal to position. Remember, position here is the variable that we created earlier. So we want to show if it's that. Else this underscore dot, oh no, well, we want to essentially hide. So, okay, to show this, what we want to do is we want to say this dot fade in. Remember, we're giving it a speed of fading in, so we can just literally say speed. And then for the complete opposite, we can say this dot fade out, and then in brackets speed. Let's just pop the underscore there. Okay, so now that we've done that, this is actually going to work. It's not, however, going to function properly when we click on it. So let's just go ahead and refresh. We're scrolling up and down here. This doesn't really make a difference, but all the while we're doing this, we're having that value changed. So when, for example, we scroll down to 1,000, that will fade in. When we're less than 1,000, that will fade out. So we now have this display functionality working. When we hover over, we have our nice mouse pointer. However, when we click it, nothing happens. Now, to do this, we're going to use jQuery to handle the click as well. So we're going to say this underscore dot click, and then we're going to perform everything within this function here. And obviously we want to scroll to the top, and that's extremely easy. We just use a window selector and we say scroll top, and then in here 0, which means 0 pixels from the top. Now you notice that we've got a value being returned from this. However, in here we're supplying a parameter and we're actually setting a value. So we could set this to 100, and that would mean that we push the user to a position 100 pixels from the top, but obviously we want 0. So let's go ahead and check this. If you just keep an eye on the scroll bar on the right hand side, when we scroll down and click on this, you see that we're redirected back to the top of the page. And because we've performed a scroll action and our position is less than 1,000, our little widget will automatically fade out. So when we click on that, it nicely fades out when the user is back to the top. So that's essentially how we go ahead and create a jQuery plugin to create a nice little back to the top widget which can be placed on your page, which will give a nice fixed position link if you've got a lot of scrolling content.